Okay, so last session at Bridge Summit 2026, we have a very exciting session here with Jared Coseglia from TruLegal, founder and CEO, and Hershel Eisenberger, head of global privacy at Coca-Cola. Yeah, they're gonna talk through, all their experience and advice they can share on growing your career in privacy. So I will pass it off to Jared.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for the kind introduction and invitation to participate. I assume everyone can hear me. We're good on technology, yeah? All right, good. I'm excited to close the show. I don't know about you, Herschel, but I always like to play cleanup. So, I'm happy to knock a grand slam out of the park for everybody. And it's going to be easy to do with you as my co-host. Before I give Herschel a very generous introduction, some of you will probably seeing this slide up here and saying, oh, I'm going to get, resume tips or what's happening in the job market or something along that line with best practices as it relates to privacy careers. And we're going to talk about some things that are much bigger picture than that as it relates to where the industry is headed and how it's impacting the individual careers of all of us who are in it. So if you're looking for resume tips, you can go visit TruLegal.ai online for that. I've got Herschel here to talk at a really high level about changes that are really systemic throughout the industry, but also just now really beginning to impact the career segment. I always tell people it's fun to start with political cartoons. We use AI in everything we do, so we're using it here too. And these are some of the things we prompted our AI when we created this political cartoon, which I think is a sign of the times of where we are right now in this very interesting conundrum of privacy and being torn between compliance and business enablement agenda. And when I first showed Herschel this slide, he said to me, Jared, I'm not sure exactly what the political cartoon is saying, but I think as we talked it out, it sort of is saying what we're here to talk about, which is what is privacy beyond compliance? And that is sort of the world we're living in right now in privacy. And a lot of people may think that that's sort of an oxymoron, what privacy beyond compliance. And we're going to unpack what that means. So if you don't know me, I'm Jared Coseglia. I'm the founder and CEO of TruLegal. We just rebranded. We were True Staffing Partners for 15 years. I've been staffing privacy professionals for well over a decade. And I am joined by this super cool, super smart Hershel Eisenberger, who is the global head of privacy for Coca-Cola. And Herschel, I'm really honored to share the stage with you. We've gotten to spend time with each other out on the conference circuit, but it has been super cool to do a deep dive with you. Please introduce yourself. Tell everyone who doesn't know you a little bit about you and what drew you to bring you to today's topic.
Thanks, Jared, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm really excited to talk about this because there's been, I think, a bit of a sea shift over the last few years in terms of what it looks like to build and maintain a privacy program at a company and what the goals are. Just a little about me. I started off my career in government. I did national security and legislation before kind of getting bitten by the privacy bug. I was at tech for a while and some different stops, and now I'm at Coca-Cola, where I help to run our global privacy and data protection program. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today, and let's get into it.
Let's do it. So before everybody wonders where we're getting all of our data, a quick snapshot here. The thing I think is most interesting here is that there were well over 12,000 applicants, just inbound individuals. We wound up sending over half of that number. I don't know if it was those inbound people necessarily to clients. So there's a lot of activity happening in the marketplace right now, a lot of people interviewing for jobs. So you're going to see some data that comes from that. When I do these panels, when I get asked to speak here, these are the most frequently asked questions that we unpack. What Herschel and I are going to really spend our time on today are three, mainly new skill sets, mainly contract versus FTE jobs, and mainly AI's impact on privacy careers. So we're going to sort of start in a reverse order of that with how AI is impacting privacy careers, because that, for me, is maybe a catalyst, maybe the tipping point, an inflection point, whatever you want to call it, that has sort of led us to a recalibration of expectations while simultaneously switching political administrations here in the United States, which has sort of sent a ripple effect wave of refocus on regulation, both domestically and abroad. So let's talk about AI's impact on legal broadly, and then we're going to whittle it down specifically to privacy. Hershel, I know you've been exposed to Eric. I think Eric's a really smart dude. If you haven't read this article, there's a link here. You can go read it. This is like, I always tell my staff, like, put that in a neon light and put it above your desk. This is one of those neon light above your desk quotes. And particularly the idea that the entire legal services market, and that includes outside counsel, that includes the software providers, that includes the service providers, are going to be completely, fundamentally reorganized. So when we think about that reorganization, this is how we're seeing it begin to boil down to how it affects individual careers and the hiring practices of people like Hershel and others that are his peers in the marketplace. These buying habits shift from mainly being, hey, I'm hiring from the guy I went to college with, he's my outside counsel, and that lasts for a 40-year relationship, which exists. But more and more now we're seeing legal operations being able to take control of scrutinizing services, value, cost in a way that they've never been able to do before, at a speed they've never been able to do before, at a level of detail and accuracy using AI they've never been able to do before. That alone, forget about all the other complications which Hershel is going to articulate to us in a minute. That alone has shifted how in-house corporate legal departments are valuing services and software. As they shift the value of their partnerships, they then also shift evaluating talent that they want to bring in-house, as well as the people who exist in-house with them already as employees. And we talk a lot about build versus buy in the AI technology world, but the same is true of talent. Are we going to build it or are we going to buy it? Are we going to train our people to use AI? Or are we going to go acquire talent that has skills that are lacking in our ecosystem? So the same paradigm is true. And then finally, that ripples down into every job description in the legal ecosystem. We'll have some form of AI component in it initially. Hershel, I want to hear your thoughts on how you feel like AI is fundamentally reorganizing the way corporate legal departments are approaching the way that they both practice law and operate as a business.
Sure. I mean, I think we were already at an inflection point when it came to privacy and data protection. It is not possible to scale your program to meet the needs of the business through, manpower alone, right? And at that moment, we have AI coming in and saying, we have a potential solution, right, of how we can help you to build processes and tools and technology that can allow you to handle more throughput, right? So that you, as an individual, can spend your time focusing on the work that matters most, on those really difficult, thorny issues. And so I think it's kind of an opportune moment, both for legal organizations and privacy programs, to be exploring how they can implement AI in smart ways to help them do what we've been struggling to do for the last decade, right? I know that on our team, the challenge that we've put down is that everybody every day should be thinking about how they can experiment with the tools that we've made available to find ways to improve processes, to be more efficient, whether it's writing emails, whether it's analyzing new legislation. It is now a priority to incorporate that into your day-to-day work. And it might be more important, in fact, than spending your time doing another privacy assessment for some low-risk item, right? And so not everything's going to work, but kind of like the laboratories of democracy among the states, the more we experiment, the more we see what does work and what won't work, the more effective we'll be. In addition, we have to partner with the legal organization as a whole, because lots of problems that privacy often tries to solve really aren't privacy specific problems, right? They're company-wide problems or they're legal organization-wide problems. But we often have really good use cases for testing out and piloting these activities. So you have to partner with your legal operations department to say, hey, we have some really good places that we think we can innovate. Let's partner together to test these out. And I'll give you an example we're doing at Coca-Cola, right? We're experimenting with different legal AI service providers. We have these DPA templates, these DPA playbooks already ready to go. Let's put them into the system. Let's see what it can do for us. Is that something we can then leverage to make it easier to help advise the business on contract language? So, it's about finding that kind of opportunity for what you've already done to mix with what's possible in the future.
I love it. We're going to get to a word chart later, and the word experimentation is going to be on there as one of the things that's emerging as a in-demand, high-valued skill set for privacy professionals that are job seeking in an AI-enabled legal ecosystem. When you said that word, now you probably saw me smile. I got like triggered and giddy because whoever thought that as privacy professionals, as as lawyers, that experimentation would now be something that was sought after as both a quality within people we hire and a quality that we now want to mentor in those that we've already hired who we're surrounded by. How do you do that?
You really have to be entrepreneurial, right? I know that's kind of a business buzzword, but it's not one you necessarily hear in the legal department as much until now.
How do you evaluate for that when you're interviewing talent or when you're looking at your internal ecosystem of available resources that already work for the organization? How do you go out and look for people that are experimenters? And then I know we're going to get into some other buzzwords that will trigger you, like comfortable with failure, change agency, things like that. How do you find that?
You have to look for people who are multi-hyphenate, right? To steal a term from pop culture, right? Or five-tool players, right? You're looking for people who aren't just one thing, right? You're looking for people who have the skills to apply their knowledge and experience in multiple circumstances and avenues and grow over time, right? So great. You have a lot of privacy knowledge, cybersecurity knowledge. That's table stakes. On top of that, you're looking for the sort of people who you think can thrive and evolve in a fast-paced environment, right? Who aren't afraid of failure, who are willing to experiment and be entrepreneurial. And those are words that aren't always synonymous with lawyers or the legal profession. And so, to the extent you are an attorney and you're looking to be in-house and you're trying to figure out what gives you the edge, it's being able to build and demonstrate those qualities. It's not enough anymore just to be a really smart lawyer who knows a lot about the law.
You know, it's fun. I think there are more creatives in law than we might give our community credit for. You know, I was a theater director, before 9/11 and, found myself in legal recruitment. And here I am, I fell in love with this community. But there are a lot of people out there that are eager to flex those muscles that maybe thought they had found themselves on a path where they don't get to flex them as much as they could have in the past. And now is your time. Now is your time. All right, let's keep it moving. We boil it down here to, okay, we've talked about sort of legal, corporate, the dynamic between outside counsel, but what we're seeing AI do in terms of the jobs we're receiving from in-house law departments is generating from this chain reaction of events. AI has accelerated routine legal tasks, right? And in that same breath, it's exposed inefficiencies. Too much billing or billing for the wrong things or the wrong rate for the wrong tasks or double billing or why so much billing, all of these things. There's also been work that's been brought in-house. So they're now in a build or buy talent and technology. What happened over the last 3 years has been a lot of that exploration. What I think is going to happen now, Hershel, and you tell me what you think, is people are now buying licenses, they're buying talent. And so the ecosystem within these programs is going to change. There's going to be change. And being the CEO of an AI-enabled company, I can tell you the rate of change could be so fast that it may break employees that are not accustomed to the speed at which their day-to-day jobs have different roles, responsibilities, and expectations. I'm curious if you've found that as AI adoption has spread throughout your professional ecosystem.
Absolutely. Everything is speeding up, right? And there are still, though, unfortunately, only 24 hours in a day, right? So what does that mean? That means that you need to figure out how to prioritize your time on the work that matters most and be more efficient in those tasks that need to get done. And I think AI is a good approach to that. But more than anything, you have to create an environment where people are really clear on what the priorities are and that they have permission not to focus on the things that fall below the line. And that can be really tough for people who haven't operated in that sort of environment before. But I don't put it all on individuals, right? It's about leadership and the organization being clear about what accountability means and everybody knowing that they have their back, right? If they're focused on other things. So yeah, no, absolutely. This is changing very rapidly.
I always say, if you're a leader, you have to assume that everyone underneath you would rather have permission than have to ask for forgiveness. And I'm constantly saying to my staff, I empower you to this, I empower you to that. You have my permission to do this. And you have to say it as a leader. You have to actually say it out loud and let people hear it, not just write it, but let them hear it, because the tone of your voice, I think, is what often is empowering.
Look, here's the thing with experimentation and trying new things and moving fast is not everything's going to go according to plan. Sometimes you are going to fail, right? And I think you need to keep two things in mind. First, just because something didn't work out doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. And unfortunately, over the course of my career, I've seen many situations where people said, well, it didn't work out. We clearly did this wrong. Why did you mess up? No, with the facts we had, we made the right decision. It didn't turn out the way we wanted. Now we need to adapt. Right. And then the second piece of it is making sure people know, right, that if things don't work out, but they were trying something new, that you are supporting them and that actually was a success, not a failure. Right. Because now we know something doesn't work. We learned a really important lesson. We're able to do it differently, elsewhere.
When I directed actors for many, many, many years, I learned very, very quickly that if you say no to the first 4 or 5 creative ideas that they have, you're not going to get the 5th or the 6th. And the 5th or the 6th are usually the best creative ideas that you're going to get from talent. So yeah, you have to give permission to fail. You have to say yes before you say no. I think this is challenging often for lawyers, but this is sort of the new world order. And the reason that's so important is because we're in an era where privacy has moved beyond pure compliance. And now where privacy programs are able to accelerate their careers, accelerate their budget, get more visibility, are in ways that are not just risk avoidance. And I want to talk about what that means. So Hershel, define for us what you think privacy beyond compliance is. And I'm going to throw up another slide before you answer. And I already stole one of your bullets. It's at the bottom. But this is how we've been categorizing things. How do you categorize privacy beyond compliance?
Sure. So, on my team, compliance is almost a 4-letter word. Obviously, there are things that we need to do in running a privacy program to make sure that we are meeting expectations, whether from customers or regulators. But ultimately, you're not going to be successful in an organization unless you're seen as a business enabler and a partner, right, who's helping the business to unlock the value of data, but responsibly. And so I think that if you have that sort of mindset to how you're building and structuring your privacy team or your data and technology team more generally, you're going to be more successful. And then the advantage will be that you will actually become more compliant because people will want to work with you. They will value your input. They will listen to you when you actually say there's some issues and risks here. But ultimately, at the end of the day, every organization has its own risk appetite. And our job is to help advise them on how that is impacted by the various data processing activities, and then what we can do to mitigate that risk so that they can move forward with confidence. But we're at kind of this inflection point, as we talked about earlier with AI, where what I'm hearing from my stakeholders is that the risk of not moving fast enough has now exceeded the risk of getting it wrong. And that's a really difficult place to be in as a legal professional or as a compliance professional, but it's where we find ourselves.
But is it, I'm a CEO, I'm an entrepreneur, so I love it because I like to take a lot of risk, right? That's how I got to where I am today. I like to take a lot of risk. And I think what's very interesting right now is there's opportunity. And I think what privacy professionals that we're coaching, that we encourage them to do, whether they're leaders or not, is looking for that opportunity as opposed to avoiding touching something that could lead to risk, now weighing in on the risk. Now potentially making people aware of something they weren't aware of, where there's going to be risk, but it could be enabling to the business and making that a priority, a proactive approach, as opposed to a reactive one. And one of the things I always hear, Hershel, is, but how do we quantify it? How do we quantify it? And so that's why we've thrown up this list here. These are ways that we found other leaders have been able to quantify. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do with the budget, and here's how we've grown. Here's how we moved the needle for the business, right? Like, hey, we helped marketing send out this enabled campaign. It reached these many more customers. We saw an inflection in this, and sometimes that stuff's hard to track. So you have to go anecdotal. Hershel, are there any anecdotal approaches or quick wins or stories that you could share with us that can be used with the board or used to a C-suite or used from a manager to a director or a director to a CPO to help quantify a successful program contributing to the business beyond compliance?
I think the most important thing is that it has to reflect the circumstance and environment that you're in. So every business talks about, opportunity and growth differently. Every business talks about risk differently. And so the most important thing in communicating the impact of privacy or AI governance, data governance to an organization is to put it in terms that they use and understand. I think it's easy to forget as privacy, experts that when we start talking about privacy, even ways that we think are very basic, people's eyes gloss over immediately and they lose sight of what you're saying. So a lot of it is listening to the board, listening to your executives and understanding how they're talking about their business and goals, and then being able to kind of frame your impact back to them. So when we talk about the impact of the privacy program on my team, right, we look at all the different kind of initiatives or programs that we helped launch and were successful. And then we use those statistics, right? But if I'm talking to the audit committee who cares about risk, I'm going to be focusing on a very different set of issues than I am if I'm talking to, right, the head of marketing. I think one other thing I'll say is it's really important to be able to be consistent over time. So one thing that we've done is build out our privacy risk taxonomy, and that's tied into our enterprise risk management program, and a way of measuring and talking about risk so that we can actually use the same language over time in a repeatable way so that people can actually compare year over year, as well as to other areas of risk. And we found that's been very helpful in helping to kind of situate what we're talking about.
And it's essential, and it's part of what we'll call operational privacy or operational AI enablement, because as we've interviewed CPOs, and this is data from about 6 months ago, so Q1 and 2 of last year, we interviewed about 250 CPOs or heads of privacy, people that were the top leader in their organization, somewhere in the Fortune 1000, maybe a little bit beyond, and only 5% of CPOs said that they had adequate staff for their program. We interviewed almost double the amount of people in the back half of last year, and that number dropped even further, another 60%, to only 2% being that they were adequately staffed. So AI enablement is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity, because the reality is privacy programs are not getting the budget that they want or need to fully staff their programs, and it's going to have to be a cyber-like effort for us, particularly in a deregulated environment over the next few years. What I always see happening with CPOs is, how do they cope with not having enough staff? When they have inadequate staff, they start to lean into outside counsel. That can get very expensive. They start to lean into their existing staff, which could lead to burnout or attrition. We've seen that happen. That happened in 2023, 2024. They lean into other departments, but there's a bell curve, a learning curve. There's you only get truncated resources. Then they lean into themselves until they're ready, and they say, "I'm ready to leave." And then they call us after they've tried all of those things. But the reality is that there is one solution that everybody seems to be turning to right now, and that's flex talent. And I'm going to throw up some statistics now, and I'll let Hershel comment on them, because it's an unbelievable trend. So this is data based on transactions that we've been a part of, hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands if you count all the years. But more importantly, we're also tracking people that we don't place ourselves, that we know moved, and when they moved and how much they moved for and all of that. And as you could see here, for the back half of last year, the market was almost entirely contract to hire staffing, flex staffing. What's interesting about this year versus last year is 42% of our contractors in 2024 wound up getting offers to convert into full-time employees. Only 3%, I think 3 to 6, wound up getting offers for conversion. Now, a lot of them are still contracting perpetually, but where the modality in 2024 was contract to hire, in 2025, it was impact fractional augmentation. So much so that we saw almost everybody in the back half of last year taking contract jobs. And that includes chief privacy officer as a service, secondee level attorneys that are making decisions for organizations about privacy. If we go and we look at it year over year, you could see that trend has really just ticked up and up and up and up as we've come out of the pandemic. During the pandemic, you could see that was really when full-time hiring was king, high demand, low supply, a return to office, work from home, chaos, chaos, chaos. We think about 1/3 to 2/3 of every organization turned over their ecosystem. And so this is how they're rebuilding. You have to keep in mind that publicly traded companies, full-time headcount hits the bottom line and hits their stock prices in a very different way than contract resources do, which become a pass-through cost. And so chief financial officers, heads of legal operation are looking again, and now they've got AI to arm themselves more acutely to do so, at what are the costs, what are the benefits, disadvantages of using outside counsel, of using ALSPs for flex talent. Hershel, I'd love to hear what your experience has been with flex talent. What's your take on this? Have you used it? Has it been successful? Words of wisdom for those that are thinking about engaging in contractors or becoming one themselves.
Sure. So I think zooming out for a second, when you think about how you build and staff a resilient privacy program, right, you want many tools in your toolkit. So that includes FTEs, it includes outside counsel, it includes contractors, it includes tooling and automation, right? Many of them, as you mentioned, have different like monetary bottom lines, which could impact, how and when you're able to spend. But at the end of the day, I think it's true that almost everybody has more work and people to handle it, right? And that trend is likely not going away. Everybody is running very lean right now. So one of the benefits, I think, of flex hiring is that it enables you to fill gaps that are immediate and critical in kind of the middle of those troughs where you're either haven't gotten to the point where you either have approval or can justify a full-time hire, but you have an immediate need. And so we have used it successfully in the past when people have gone out on maternity leave, when somebody left unexpectedly, but we weren't quite sure whether or not we knew exactly what the role was going to look like for the long term and couldn't commit yet. And so again, I think if you see it as one tool in your toolbox of a way of how you build a strong, resilient program, it's fantastic. In terms of like what we think about in terms of making it successful, it's a couple things, some of which are the same as hiring any other person, right? Obviously, they have to have the underlying skills and experience. And sometimes with flex people, you're getting more than you would get with an FTE hire, which is really interesting. But at the same time, they need to have the right personality and culture fit so that they're going to be able to come in and contribute immediately. That's really important for us, right? Lots of really smart people out there, but you want somebody who's going to gel with your team and be, an immediate addition. The other thing is, and I found, is you have to be really clear about what it is you're bringing them in to do. Just like any job, but almost more so. You might have them for 6 months or a year or even less time. And so the more you can really clearly articulate what they're there to do and how they're going to get that done while they're there, all the better. Because the thing that flex people don't have, right, is they don't have the knowledge of your organization. And so that's going to be something that you're going to have to overcome.
You've dispelled so many of, I think, the myths that people have about contractors. The first of which is, if I'm getting a contractor and they cost less than my outside counsel, they must be 10 times less the caliber too. And I think often the reciprocal can be true. Often a lot of people have chosen, in fact, 1 out of every 3 Americans is a contractor right now in the US economy. And that is not disproportionate in legal. That is very much the case in legal. I also think you've dispelled the myth that contractors have to be able to come in and do whatever and be a Swiss Army knife. Most contractors right now, and you can see this from number 1, aren't Swiss Army knives. They're coming in, as you said, Hershel, to solve a specific problem. And what I think is interesting in the last year, one of the biggest problems they've solved is up-leveling the people around them. And in an AI-enabled, in a culture where you desire everyone to be AI enabled, sometimes the best way to do that isn't to send them for a training or a certification in an uncodified technology ecosystem, which we are in right now, but rather bring in someone who can work with them on a daily basis. And a lot of our customers are asking for that more. We only have a few more minutes, so I want to talk about new skill sets. The thing I think that is most remarkable about this, and then I'll kick it back to you, Hershel, you don't see GDPR up here. You don't see a CIPP up here. You don't see the EU AI Act up here. You're not seeing any of that kind of stuff up here. These words are what the AI recording from our prep call sucked out of our conversation as the things that we talked about the most, having the greatest value from people when we prepped for this call. So that's why you're seeing familiar words here. What are your thoughts when we consider that 3 years ago today, none of these words might have been on, or maybe a few?
I think that's pretty common, right? I think the economy and the market continue to evolve, and it's incumbent upon us to continue to evolve with it, right? And those are always going to be the most successful individuals. I think that increasingly, and this is where proactive reactivity comes from, we live in a turbulent and uncertain time. And so, whereas before we might have tried to get ahead of the curve, now we just have to be prepared for whatever comes. And so, I think as a job seeker, if you're trying to think about what will make you stand out to a hiring manager, it's again table stakes. You have to have the requisite knowledge and experience. But beyond that, you have to think about whether through examples or experience, how you can demonstrate that you're a person who can come in and help solve problems quickly and adaptively. And if you can do that, right, I think then people are willing and able to hire you with kind of confidence because they're like, okay, this person has what they need to be immediately impactful, which is always issue number one. But then whatever comes my way, because something's going to be different 6 months from now, I have the confidence that this person is going to help me solve that problem. And if you're choosing between two people, one who solves your problem today and another who can also solve your problems tomorrow, you're always going to take the latter.
We're about to run out of time, so we're going to quickly go through a guidance as our wrap up. Top 10 bits of wisdom, and these are for hiring managers and job seekers. If you're looking for an accelerated privacy career, you need to be part of an accelerated privacy program. That means being a catalyst within the one you're in, or considering one somewhere else and knowing what you're looking for in terms of acceleration. Accelerated privacy programs impact the business beyond compliance. That is absolutely the state of play right now. So if you find yourself having extreme guardrails on your ability to move the business beyond compliance, again, that's something to consider professionally. Practice articulating your AI experience. I'll just do a quick anecdote, and we're going to run out of time, and then we'll take a few questions if we have time. Since we're the last one of the day, we can go a few over. Ben gave me permission. Look, it used to be everybody got asked the same 3 questions on any interview for any job in any industry. Why are you interested in the job? Why are you going to be good at the job? And why you're interested in the company? And now there's a 4th question. What have you done with AI? And people are not coming into interviews prepared to answer that question. And if the answer is, I'm not allowed to use AI at work, there's no buy-in, then you've got to show that curiosity and experimentation on the personal side. And we talk a lot about saying, yeah, it's okay to talk about personal examples on interviews. If you don't have them professionally, it's better than not having an answer at all. And Hershel, it looks like you have a thought about that.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly true. Your job may not provide you with the opportunities to build these skills. The people I know who have been most successful are the ones who then figure out other ways to go out and get them, right? Whether it's taking a course or certification, whether it's experimenting with it on their own. My son and I right now are trying to use, I won't endorse any particular tool, but we're trying to use AI to vibe code a video game, right? And that's fun, and I'm enjoying it with my son, but it's also giving me exposure to how these things work that wasn't necessarily otherwise getting. So, it's almost everywhere I've ever worked has said that it's about 70 or 80% on the individual to figure out how to build new skills. So, you have to go out there, and there's plenty of opportunities to do that.
And it's not just about going out there and having those skills. It's actually practicing talking about it with others so that when you're on an interview, you can be articulate about how those skills might translate into a business environment. Hershel did a great job of touching on this. Seek problems, solve problems. Don't wait for them to come to you. Very important. I remember saying that to e-discovery professionals 25 years ago, and now we're saying it to privacy professionals. I mean, we've been saying it, but now we're really saying it in the climate that we're in right now. Self-regulation and preparation for future enforcement. I mean, I think regulators are going to come knocking and they may say, well, what have you done? And if the answer is nothing, I think that's a much worse answer, as I'm finding with a lot of leaders I talk to. Then, well, we've at least done this. We're trying to regulate as best we can ourselves, and here's some of the things we put in place. Unbundling individual hiring employment expectations. This one's really important. It goes back to the fractional talent, meaning, a lot of hiring managers come to us and they say, I need all of this and I've got budget for one person. You're like, well, you're not going to get all that in one person. It's impossible. So you can unbundle those expectations and say, hey, you could hire 3 people as contractors or one that doesn't have these skills and figure out a way to ramp them. The same is true of job seeking. You don't have to be at one employer for 15 years anymore to get good experience. In fact, a lot of employers want to see movement from privacy professionals, particularly ones in early career state, to see that they've been exposed to different kinds of programs, situations, and stakeholders. I think we covered this. we covered this, and we'll close with, this is the fastest way to get employed. So job seekers often come to us in privacy, and they're very determined to get full-time employment. And often 3 to 6 months later, they come to us and they say, okay, I'll take anything contract you've got. So be open-minded from the get-go, because part of the job search process, particularly if you are unemployed, but even if you're not, is getting in front of people and creating brand recognition for yourself as an individual in the community. And interviewing is part of that process. Hershel, before I close the show, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, first of all, thanks again to Privado and you for having me on today. This was a lot of fun. I know that the external environment is really challenging right now, and I know it can feel like a lot, especially if you're looking for jobs. What I would say is hang in there, right? I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity going forward because these data issues are only getting more important to companies. And if you make sure that you are somebody who is at the crest of that wave in terms of understanding the new technologies, being adaptable and flexible and entrepreneurial, I think you're going to be just fine.
We'll take a few quick questions. I see there's 2 in the channel, and one of them I'm going to take because I actually have a slide that'll answer your question for you coming right after this. AI-enabled business. Are you evaluating your rate versus value? Are you still expecting employees to cram 40 hours full of AI-accelerated decisions, or are you building in breaks and other wisdom-enabling personal habits to foster healthy minds and decisions, expecting only a certain amount of value and not a lot of hours? You can actually read about exactly my opinion and answer to that question. I wrote a whole blog about it. And that blog is titled Slow the Rate of Change and Raise the Rate of Pay. We went from 33 employees in January of 23. We're down to 16 employees now. We're up 20% on our top line revenue. And I think the staff that's left behind is happier than they've ever been. They all got big raises at the end of the last year for the most part. And, A, put my money where my mouth is, but B, the other thing I promised them is we're going to slow down. We are going to slow down, not the pace at which we work, not the intensity at which we deliver service to customers, but the rate at which everything changes. That's the decision, I think, some C-level executives who have put their staff through a pace that has literally broken some, who have opted out of the business as a result. Yeah, you got to slow down, but that doesn't mean slowing down the business. It means slowing down the change. And yeah, we're building in enablers the way you described. I don't want to say we figured it all out, but we're working on it.
Jared, if I could just jump in there, let me say one thing as a manager. I spend more time telling people to take vacation and to actually turn off their phone than anything else, right? The pace is more than anybody can handle, and we have to be really thoughtful and conscientious about how we set ourselves up to succeed in the long run, right? Like I said at the very beginning, it's not like there's more time in the day to handle all of this work. And so that's where making sure you're thinking thoughtfully about where your priorities are, right? That you're prioritizing and rewarding efficiency and accomplishment over just work become really important. And that tone comes from the top. People notice when bosses take time off and they really mean it and they delegate responsibility and empower people to make decisions about where their time is best served.
Yeah, and I think that goes in both directions. Just back to your earlier point, there was someone will fact check me and tell me what the actual source was. I think it was MIT, but it might have been Stanford. Did a study that said in 2024, 2025, I think, corporate America, 60% of AI-enabled projects failed. 60%. And that seems like a lot. But I think to answer the person's question about what kind of enablers are we building in, well, we're being much more diligent from a leadership perspective about what projects we ask to be experimented on, because we're not going to ask to be experimented on as many things maybe as we did in the last 2 years if we think the likelihood of failure is higher because we don't want so much change. So it's a balancing act, right? Between that employment incentivizing experimentation and failure, but also not setting them up for failure by giving them nothing but things they're going to fail on, if that makes sense. I think that's all the time we have for today. If anybody has any additional questions, you can reach out to Hershel and I. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. If you're interested in learning more about TruLegal, you can visit us at trulegal.ai. You can info me at jared@trulegal.ai. And I want to thank Privado. I want to thank Ben. I want to thank Hershel for being an amazing guest and co-host. And we hope you'll have us both back next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Hershel. Yeah, we got 10 extra minutes of bridge. So that was really exciting. Yeah, I think the questions were great. So yeah, well, I'll wrap up this session and then I'm going to have Vape Hub come back on and we'll just do a quick closing remarks. So yeah, thanks for everyone who's still here.